You ever move into a place and feel, right away, like you don't belong? Like everything is too perfect, like you've just stepped onto the set of a TV show where everyone's playing a role? That's exactly how Oak Ridge Gardens felt the day we moved in. The lawns were too neat. The driveways too clean. Every mailbox matched. Every flower bed was trimmed with the same color mulch. At first glance, it was suburban heaven. But if I had known what was waiting underneath that plastic perfection, I never would have signed the lease that we moved for Ellie, my daughter. She's 9 years old, has cerebral palsy, and was born with brittle bone disease. She's the strongest little girl I know. Despite her condition, she tries to live a normal life. She uses a leg brace and walks with a little limp, but she walks, and more importantly, she smiles. That we thought Oak Ridge would be the kind of place where she could make friends and feel safe. That's what the online reviews said. Tight-knit community. Safe for families. Excellent HOA oversight. That last part was our first mistake. On day 2 of moving in, we met her, Karen Jennings. HOA president, neighborhood watchdog, and full-time buzzkill. You know the type. Tightly pulled back blonde hair. Oversized sunglasses even on cloudy days. Always in yoga pants, though I never saw her enter or leave the gym. And the clipboard, God, that clipboard never left her hands. She introduced herself with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I like to keep the community running smoothly, she said, eyes darting toward Ellie, who was sitting quietly on our porch swing, her brace peeking out under her dress. We take safety seriously here. Especially at the playground. I thanked her, politely, and mentioned how excited Ellie was to meet the neighborhood kids and play outside. Karen's smile faltered just slightly. Her next word stayed with me, well, not all kids are built for every environment. The equipment is standard grade. We can't be responsible for accidents. I should have known then. Over the next few weeks, Ellie tried to make friends, and we tried to settle in. But small things kept happening, so small you'd almost miss them if you weren't looking. Notes in our mailbox with no return name. Don't let her run. The slide has a weight limit. Liability is a community concern. Then the equipment started getting tampered with. Twice, Ellie's swing was gone, removed entirely. Once, the steps to the slide were slick with something oily. When I confronted Karen, she claimed ignorance and gave me a pointed reminder that the HOA doesn't police the playground daily. But here's what I think now: she was policing it, she just didn't like who was using it. Ellie started getting anxious. She'd ask me before every visit to the playground, "Do you think she'll be there?" She meant Karen. That woman made my daughter feel unwelcome in the one place kids are supposed to be free. Then came the HOA meeting. Karen brought up equipment misuse, without naming names. But everyone in that room knew. The way she looked at me. The way she said, certain residents should consider alternative recreation methods. I held my tongue. I thought we could ignore her, let her little power games pass. That I was so wrong, because just a week later, on a quiet Thursday afternoon, something happened that turned my stomach and shattered Ellie's bones, and it all started with that same voice, clipped, angry, and way too close to the monkey bars. That it was supposed to be an ordinary afternoon, sunny, quiet, and just warm enough that the spring breeze felt like a gentle promise of better days. Ellie had asked me that morning, shyly, if she could go to the playground after her online class. She hadn't asked in over a week, not since the last time Karen just happened to walk by, and muttered something about lawsuits and kids with special needs being better off indoors. I looked into my daughter's eyes that day and saw that tiny flicker of hope, the kind only a child can carry, and I nodded. "Yes," I said. "Let's go." We packed a little snack, filled her water bottle, and walked the 2 blocks down to the neighborhood park. Ellie was all smiles. She even skipped a little, her leg brace clicking softly as it met the pavement. That sound used to haunt me, used to remind me of everything she'd been through in hospitals, surgeries, casts, but now it was just a part of her. Just Ellie being Ellie. The playground was nearly empty, just a young mom with a stroller on the far bench. I helped Ellie up the steps to the play structure, and she climbed carefully, proudly, her hands gripping each rung with determination. I watched her from the bench, reminding myself to breathe. It's a strange thing, watching your child do something as simple as play and still feeling like you're balancing on the edge of a knife. Then she appeared, Karen, out of nowhere, like she'd materialized from the hedges themselves. She wasn't wearing her usual tracksuit. She looked agitated. Her mouth was tight. Her eyes locked on Ellie like a hawk tracking prey. My stomach sank. Is that your daughter again? She called out to me, already walking closer. I stood up, instantly alert. She's allowed to be here, Karen. It's a public playground. Karen scoffed, like I'd insulted her. That equipment isn't safe for her. I've told the HOA a dozen times we need restrictions for her. She has every right to be here. I cut in, trying to keep my voice steady. She's careful. She's not hurting anyone. She's a liability, Karen snapped, and then, before I could even process what she was doing, she stormed past me, toward the structure. Karen! I yelled, already moving, but she was faster than I expected. Ellie had just reached the small monkey bars. She liked to hang for a moment before dropping down. It gave her a sense of victory. Get down from there, Karen barked. Ellie flinched. I can do it, she stammered, her small voice trembling. I said get down. Karen shouted again, and that's when she reached up and grabbed Ellie by the arm. I screamed. I ran. But I was seconds too late. There was a sharp, sickening crack. Ellie wailed, this horrible, high-pitched scream that I'll never forget. Her body crumpled as Karen let go, like she realized too late what she'd done. My daughter hit the mulch like a rag doll. I fell to my knees beside her, my hands trembling as I tried not to touch her arms, both of which were bent in ways arms should never bend. Ellie was sobbing, gasping, trying to breathe through the pain. Karen just stood there, expressionless, like she'd dropped a plate. Not a little girl, I warned you, she said coldly. This is why I said she shouldn't be here. I snapped. I don't even remember what I shouted. I called 911 with hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. The other mom had come running by then, cradling her own child and staring at Karen in horror. The ambulance arrived in less than 5 minutes. The police followed. Karen tried to claim Ellie fell, and that she was trying to help her down, but my daughter's arms were broken in 2 places each. The ER doctor said it was blunt force trauma, not a fall. And there were other witnesses, including the young mother who saw everything. Karen was arrested that night, charged with felony child endangerment and aggravated assault. I sat beside Ellie's hospital bed for 2 straight nights, holding her hand as best I could without hurting her. She didn't say much, just stared ahead. Her light dimmed, and I swore, right then and there, I would make sure that woman never touched another child again. The hours after the incident were a blur, a tornado of paperwork, police questions, and hospital forms. But nothing was more haunting than the silence that settled in Ellie's room. My once bubbly, bright little girl, who used to hum under her breath and point out cloud shapes through the window, just lay there, arms casted, face pale, eyes blank. The doctor told me her bones would heal, that physically, she'd recover. But I saw what they couldn't. A quiet terror had sunk into my daughter's soul. Her safe space, the playground, was gone. Stolen by a woman with too much power and no compassion. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this be swept under the HOA rug. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer. A real fighter. She nearly dropped her coffee when I told her the full story. The fact that a homeowners association president, an adult, physically assaulted a disabled child and then had the audacity to blame the child for it, was horrifying even by legal standards. Karen had already made her call to the HOA board, trying to spin the story. She claimed Ellie was dangling dangerously from the monkey bars and that she had intervened to prevent a fall. She described her actions as a reflex, said she had gently guided Ellie down to safety. It was the kind of gaslighting that almost sounded believable, if you weren't there. If you didn't hear the crack. If you didn't see the fear in my daughter's eyes. But then, the witnesses came forward. The young mother at the park that day made a formal statement to the police, recounting the entire thing. Her toddler, she said, had started crying from the sound of the screaming. Another neighbor who arrived moments later confirmed seeing Karen's furious posture and Ellie sobbing on the ground. Even Ellie, despite the trauma, bravely told a social worker what happened, tears streaming down her cheeks as she recounted the moment Karen grabbed her. That was when the charges shifted. The police upgraded the assault charge from simple battery to felony aggravated assault of a minor with special needs. The DA took special interest in the case when it was made clear that Karen was not just a resident, but someone with influence and a long history of harassing certain neighbors under the guise of enforcing HOA regulations. The community began to talk. Whispers turned into murmurs. Murmurs became outrage. Neighbors who had once smiled tightly and nodded at Karen from behind hedges suddenly started voicing long-held frustrations. Anonymous letters were slid under our door. Emails forwarded. A father shared how his autistic son had once been banned from using sidewalk chalk because Karen deemed it visual clutter. A woman revealed that her niece, who used a walker, had been told by Karen not to play hopscotch on the court because it wasn't designed for children like her. Patterns. Ugly ones that it wasn't just my daughter. Karen had a history of targeting children with disabilities, and now she'd gone too far. The media picked it up next. A small local paper first, then the local news. HOA president charged after playground assault on disabled child. I saw Karen's mugshot on the evening broadcast. Her eyes were empty. Cold. Like she still believed she'd done nothing wrong. But the most chilling part, she was still trying to fight the charges that she'd hired a lawyer, filed a statement with the HOA claiming she was the victim of a smear campaign. She wanted to be reinstated as president. She claimed I was using my daughter's condition for sympathy and publicity. I wanted to scream. To shake the world and ask, what kind of monster does that? But instead, I gathered every piece of evidence I could. Photos. Medical records. Witness statements. I worked with the lawyer, with Ellie's pediatrician, with the school counselor. I wrote a victim impact statement, one I would later read in court with trembling hands. The fight wasn't over, but one thing was finally clear: Karen Jennings was not above the law anymore. The courthouse smelled like old paper, polished tile, and nerves. I held Ellie's hand with one of mine, her casts wrapped in soft fleece to keep her warm. In the other hand, I clutched my victim impact statement like a lifeline. We weren't in a high-profile case by national standards, but you'd never have guessed that from the packed courtroom. Residents from our neighborhood filled the benches. Some came out of support, others out of morbid curiosity, but no one, not even the judge, could ignore the tension in that room. Karen sat with her high-priced attorney, wearing a modest beige suit like she thought the color of her clothes would make her look harmless. She didn't glance at us. Not once. Not at Ellie. She just sat there, stone-faced, her fingers tightly gripping the edge of the table like she could will the courtroom to disappear. The prosecution opened with facts, the physical trauma, the eyewitnesses, the confirmed medical reports, the nature of the injuries on a disabled minor. They made it clear this wasn't just an accident. It was a violent overstep of authority that ended with a child in pain and fear. Then it was my turn. That my voice shook at first. It always does when I speak about Ellie. I stood behind the podium and read aloud from the paper I'd rewritten a dozen times over the past few weeks. She's 7 years old, I began. She loves butterflies and puzzles. She has a hard time with stairs, but she'll always try. She tells me she dreams of running races someday, even though she needs braces to walk. And now, because of one woman's rage, she flinches when a stranger raises their voice. She won't go near a playground anymore. I paused, swallowed, and looked right at Karen. You didn't just break her bones. You broke a piece of her spirit. The room was quiet, dead quiet. I could feel the weight of every breath, every tear someone tried to blink back. Even the judge leaned slightly forward, his face tight. Karen's defense team tried to minimize. They claimed it was a lapse in judgment, a moment of poor decision-making fueled by concern for community safety. They leaned hard into the narrative that Karen hadn't meant to hurt Ellie, that she had acted in haste. But then the witness testimonies began. The young mother from the park testified calmly, clearly, no exaggerations, no drama. She described Karen's tone, the look on her face, how fast she moved, how rough her hands had looked as she grabbed Ellie. A neighbor who had previously been too afraid to come forward spoke about her own encounter with Karen, how she had once yelled at her son, who has Down syndrome, for moving too slowly on the community path. The stories stacked up, each more damning than the last. Even Ellie, when gently questioned in a private session, spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but she told them what happened. She didn't cry, she just stared at the floor and said, "She pulled me really hard. I said I could do it, but she didn't listen." The prosecution rested, and it was like a thundercloud lifted. When the judge finally addressed the court, he looked tired. Not annoyed, heavy. Like the weight of what he'd heard over those days had worn him down. He said this case wasn't just about one child, but about a culture of cruelty hidden under the guise of rules. That Karen's actions were not just inexcusable, but dangerous. That no position, not HOA leadership, not age, not social clout, justified assaulting a child, especially one so vulnerable. Karen was found guilty of aggravated assault of a minor with special needs and child endangerment. Her sentencing was scheduled for a later date, but she was immediately remanded to house arrest until then. No more HOA meetings, no more community control. Just a woman trapped in the home she once ruled like a queen. And that day, as we walked out of the courtroom, Ellie squeezed my hand with her casted fingers and whispered, "Can we get ice cream?" I nodded. Because she deserved that and so much more. But this wasn't over. Not yet. The sentencing was coming, and I would be there, front row. The day of sentencing felt different. There was no more fear, no more doubt, just the quiet pulse of justice about to arrive. I didn't bring Ellie to this one. She'd already been through enough, and I wanted to protect what little healing she had begun. Instead, I came alone, with a photograph of her tucked inside my jacket pocket, the one where she was smiling, cheeks painted like a butterfly, arms still free of casts and scars. I needed the judge to see that Ellie. When I spoke again, the courtroom wasn't as full this time, but those who came sat in silence, heads tilted forward like they were holding their breath. Karen sat across from me once again, but this time her confidence was gone. No makeup, no expensive suit, just a plain gray sweater and the hollow look of someone who finally understood they weren't above consequence. Before sentencing, the judge allowed me to give a final statement. I didn't need the paper this time. I stood, breathed deeply, and spoke from the place where pain and love coexist. I'm not here because I want revenge, I began. I'm here because my daughter deserved to feel safe, and someone took that from her. Karen Jennings wasn't protecting anyone, she was enforcing her idea of control. And for that, my child spent weeks in pain, in casts, in nightmares. I stepped closer to the bench, my voice steady. No amount of jail time will undo what happened. But if this courtroom means anything today, let it mean that children like Ellie matter. That their bodies, their rights, their safety matter. That disability does not mean disposable. There were no outbursts. No shouting. Just quiet acknowledgement. Karen was given 4 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 2. In addition, she was issued a lifetime restraining order from my family, required to complete extensive anger management and sensitivity training, and was permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in the state. The judge made a point of saying that what she had done wasn't just a criminal act, it was a breach of basic human decency. As she was led away in handcuffs, she finally looked at me. Her face was unreadable. Maybe she expected pity. Maybe she saw a mother who refused to be silent. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. She was no longer my problem. Outside, the air felt sharper. Cleaner. Over the weeks that followed, something shifted in our neighborhood. Karen's supporters vanished. A new HOA board was elected, one focused more on kindness than control. People started smiling again. Children played freely, without fear of judgment. The playground was repainted and renamed Ellie's Garden. The community wanted to honor her courage. She cried when she saw it.as for Ellie, her arms healed. So did her heart, slowly. Therapy helped, and so did time. One day, she asked if she could go back to the playground, not to the monkey bars, but to the swings. She said she wanted to feel the wind again. And when she climbed onto that swing, held the chains with those once broken arms, and lifted her feet from the ground, I knew we were finally free. Karen Jennings may have broken something that day. But in the end, she only strengthened what she tried to destroy: a family's love, a child's spirit, and a community's belief in doing the right thing, even when it's hard, and that was worth every fight.